Right now, right now. 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 Oh, I got a real good feeling.
We try to bring you high-quality educational and informational content every single day. Why do you think the price is having such an anemic time? The news story of the hour. Jump onto the chart. Is this the beginning of a massive financial unraveling? We gotta add a little addendum to the show map today, and so we start here on the daily. Now, we've been looking at the RSI on Bitcoin's daily chart for the last several days. Well, what's happening? It's been increasing over the last 50 years since the government has been Hey guys, what's going on? Jebb here, and welcome back to Coffee and Crypto Live, guys. This is your week daily morning show where we bring you the latest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, historical, economic, geopolitical, and all kinds of different conversation, technical, on-chain, and most regularly recently, fundamental analysis. And in today's episode of Coffee and Crypto Live, we are going to be addressing the elephant in the room known as Genesis. This was one of the largest lending companies in the entire platform, in the entire cryptocurrency industry. And according to a bankruptcy filing, which we'll be talking about here briefly, they owe Gemini, specifically the Gemini Earn program, $766 million. And on top of that, since Genesis is going bankrupt, we're likely going to see a breakup of the DCG empire. It would be very likely that we see Grayscale getting involved in this to cover the hole in Genesis's books. It would also make a lot of sense if we saw DCG end up having to sell off different assets, and one of those assets that it seems like they may end up selling off is none other than a little media company that you may have heard of. This is a small one. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it's called Coindesk. And it just so happens to be a small media company, but it is, however, the largest media company in the entire cryptocurrency industry. So, funnily enough, the rabbit hole goes pretty deep today. We have an article on Coindesk talking about the collapse of Genesis, and then we're also going to look at a live stream that Charles Hoskinson did over the last 24 hours, where he pondered the idea of buying Coindesk outright because they seem to be trying to raise money right now, and he's interested in buying them for the sake of journalistic integrity. There's a lot going on in crypto today. This is going to be a deep story. And then we also have a couple of different updates from the geopolitical front. As you guys know, we've been covering the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. We've been covering the collapse of globalization quite extensively here on the channel because it's going to have a huge impact not only on crypto, but also on your life in general. The chessboard has been thrown in the air, and we're going to spend the next 5 to 10 years seeing where the pieces may land. And one of those pawn movements has been Poland. We're going to talk about what Poland has threatened to do over the course of this stream. A lot to dive into. Very excited about today's stream. It all came together really quickly. This is a very, very, very serious, very exciting, very important day in the history of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And funnily enough, Bitcoin is not phased. We will talk about that as well towards the later half of this show. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to everybody in chat. Looks like Rockin' Metal News was the very first today. He said, "Hey Jebb, as you guys know, today is FinSol Friday, and every single Friday we like to read a bunch of different people's names, especially the green names. We read all the green names every single day, and we also read the first commenter in the live stream chat every single day. So if you want to get a shout out and get a guaranteed shout out, try and be the first one to the stream. Let's go ahead and take a drink of water. I'm still getting over a cold, and my throat is still very scratchy, so stay hydrated with me, and we'll keep going here. Siobhan Golay in chat said, "Hello, Jebb from the night side." Good morning there. Hi, how are you doing, Siobhan Golay? How are you doing? I guess it would be nighttime over there in India. What is it? Probably 8, 9 o'clock in the evening? Crypto Mini Bike in chat said, "Good morning, everyone." Justin Eubank said, "Good morning, Jebb." Crypto Smitty said, "Good morning, y'all," with the sunglasses on, the shades on. There you go. Got CBD Suddy in chat said, "Good morning, sir." Justin Eubanks giving a shout out to everybody. Justin Eubanks said, "Smash the likes." That's right. We've got 200 people already watching. Only 5 minutes in. Let's see if we can't get up to 100 likes before the 10-minute mark passes. We got Crypto Smitty in chat said, "Hit the likes." Classic IT Guy in chat said, "Good morning." Let's see. Siobhan Golay said, "Hi there." Flavion Goncalves said, G'day, mate." Are you from Australia? G'day, mate. CBD Studies in chat. We got Jojo in chat. 8:36 p.m. over here. 8:36? Are you on like a half a time zone? I know there's a couple of those over there. Is Is that what it is? You're on like a 30-minute offset? I think I do remember that there's one of those that runs through China, and if it ran through China, if it's in Western China, it might run through India as well. That's interesting. I did not know that. Pick up some traditional medicinal tea packs, Jebb. Add honey. That's a good idea. I probably should do that. My wife drinks this lemon honey tea whenever she gets sick because she wants to, we want to be careful about medicine and stuff with the baby, with her being pregnant. So I should probably drink some of that. It probably would help a lot. I've been having some cough drops and they've helped too. Anyway, we've got a lot to get into. And by the way, this is the hat right here. If you're wondering what that is, I like to keep it right there. We are going to go ahead and jump onto CoinMarketCap. Dude, do a Scottish accent again. That's how you know it was a bad accent, because I was trying to do Australian. Anyway, Bitcoin is currently trading at $21,100 and change. It is up 1.61% over the last 24 hours. Ethereum up about 2% over the last 24 hours. Both of these assets up nearly 30% year to date. The year began 20 days ago, and both of these assets have added tens of billions of dollars, over $100 billion collectively, and combined, they are both trading at collectively trading at almost exactly $600 billion. All of cryptocurrency sitting right there around $980 billion. If you'll remember the dichotomy that we set up, it's very simple. I'm going to run through it again just for anybody who's new here. This is something that we're looking at heavily. We're looking at the fact that Bitcoin right now has the Dixie and the S&P 500 correlating in a way that is quite bullish for it. Now, the S&P 500 has kind of fallen off a little bit. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. But the Dixie is sitting in very prime territory. As you can see, this is the S&P 500 right here. That is the major stock indice of the United States stock market over on the New York Stock Exchange. The SPY, the SPY, is rallying quite substantially. We've had a little bit of a correction here, but nothing too concerning, because if we look at the SPY, you can see that it's actually sitting above an uptrending level of support right here, so it's not actually that bad. But looking back at Bitcoin, you can see the SPY is rallying up. The Dixie, which is the dollar currency index, is moving to the downside. And if you'll recall, one of the major implications of this is that Bitcoin should be doing very well. I'm not going to go into all of the historicity, all of the historical data here. Excuse me. But normally when normally when the SPY is moving to the downside, then you're going to see a major drop on Bitcoin. I'll just show you the historical chart here for a little while, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. You can see the S&P 500 started dropping at the exact same point in history that we saw the top of this bull market. We saw a drop right here during the pandemic. We saw a drop and a plateauing right here during the 2018 bear market. We also saw the market flattening out and curving to the downside during this previous bear market. So there is a heavy correlation between the SPY and between Bitcoin. Same thing is true for the Dixie. Whenever the Dixie is on a run, as you can see right here, the Bitcoin market is probably in a slump. It's on a run right here. This was towards the end of this market. We saw however, what we see is that whenever the Dixie is moving to the downside, as we saw here, here, and here, that's generally speaking when you're seeing bull markets forming on Bitcoin. So the golden correlation that you're going to look for, obviously, if those two things are true, and the Dixie and the stock market are remarkably powerful and important to the industry, to the cryptocurrency industry, which they are, then you're naturally going to look for the Dixie to be going down and the SPY to be going up if you are looking for a bullish paradigm in crypto. And that's what we're seeing right now. Not only that, of course, if you'll remember to the last several days worth of streams, we've seen that the CPI came down 0.6%. We saw the PPI, that's the producer price index, come down 1.6%. We also see that CME Futures is predicting with, let's check here, a 94.3% likelihood that we're going to see a 25 basis point rate hike coming out of the Fed come February the 1st, 2023, which I would broadly agree with. I think they'll probably continue rising it at 0.25 to at least 5%, if not even 5.5%. So we may see several more rate hikes moving throughout this year, but the rate of the rate hikes will more than likely slow down to a quarter of a percent. All of those things in tandem set up a macro environment for crypto that is very fertile for Bitcoin to go into a rally for. And the reason I bring that up is because this right here is really, really, really bad news. Like, this is a really, really big deal. If you want to know why, let's just remember what we looked at when we saw FTX go bankrupt. They had about $9.8 billion in liabilities, and they had around $3 billion in liquid assets. Not in liquid assets, but in assets. Many of those were, for the most part, illiquid. They had about $1 billion in highly liquid assets. So we're talking about things like Solana, which that wasn't very liquid anyway, considering we saw Solana dive off of a cliff after FTX went bankrupt. So that made things even more difficult. But FTX did not have that much money. They were looking at owing their creditors probably somewhere, we still don't know the exact number, somewhere between $5 and $9 billion. So that just gives you perspective on how big of a deal the FTX collapse was. Genesis owes over $3.5 billion to just its top 50 creditors. So we're looking at a bankruptcy on the order of an FTX, however, just ever so slightly smaller in the amount that it owes. One difference here is that Genesis is largely, anyway, not a customer-facing institution. They majority work with large players like other companies or whales in their lending activities. However, one of those major companies that they work with is called Gemini, and Gemini has 340,000 earned users that right now cannot get their money. So we'll go ahead and transition here into our first segment where we talk about Genesis. Then we're going to move on, talk a little bit about the cryptocurrency itself of Bitcoin, see how that is being impacted. And then we're going to talk a little bit about world events and geopolitics because there are a couple of updates there that I want to make sure you guys are keeping in mind. All right, let's do it. Genesis has over 100,000 creditors between the three of its companies that declared bankruptcy. This, funnily enough, this article is on Coindesk, and we will talk about that here in a second. I was wondering if Coindesk was actually going to cover this, considering Coindesk and Genesis are both owned by the same company, DCG, but not only did they cover it, they also left a disclosure down here, which was quite nice. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Excuse the coughing, guys. I do apologize. Crypto fund Gemini, trading giant Cumberland, Mirana, Moon Alpha Finance, and VanEck's New Finance Income Fund are among the 50 largest Genesis creditors, according to a bankruptcy filing published on late Thursday night. And by the way, this is a pretty funny picture up here. A Genesis booth at the FTX conference in the Bahamas. Doomed to fail, guys. Golly. Crypto lender Genesis filed for bankruptcy during the late U.S. hours of Thursday in what it called a strategic action to achieve a global resolution to maximize value for all our clients and stakeholders and strengthen its business for the future. Yada, yada, yada. Amongst its creditors are names that will be familiar to observers of the crypto industry. Genesis owes Gemini, the trust company. Gemini used Genesis as a vehicle for its yield product, $766 million. Trading fund Cumberland DRW, $18.7 million. Crypto fund Mirana, which is invested in Bybit, $151.5 million. Moon Alpha Finance, the team behind Babel Finance, is owed $150 million. And VanEck's New Finance Income Fund, $53 million. There are also a number of creditors that have been redacted. An unknown creditor is owed $462.2 million, and another is owed $230 million. Genesis and Coindesk have the same parent company, Digital Currency Group. A company called Heliva International Corp is owed $55 million and lists Decentralized Finance, Decentraland's CFO, Santiago Esponda, as a contact point. However, when contacted by Coindesk, Ryan de Taboada, Decentraland COO, denied that it was an official investment from Decentraland. So there's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, this is just yet another piece of contagion because this likely did have a lot to do with FTX on two fronts. Number one, we already know from the tweets from Cameron Winklevoss, which we will be looking at in a second to catch everybody up to speed who may not know what's going on here. We already know that FTX owed Genesis $175 million. So that already put a major hole in their balance sheet. However, the main contagion that took place here was the fact that Genesis and Three Arrows Capital, remember them, the hedge fund that went bankrupt last May, June, somewhere in that territory? They owed Genesis $1.2 billion. So this is actually more of a contagion move from Three Arrows Capital than it was from FTX. However, FTX had a huge impact on this because Genesis ended up owing people a lot of money because it took on more debt during that time between when Three Arrows Capital went bankrupt and now, while also having the value of its assets decline quite substantially because the market had declined so much. On top of that, the $1.2 billion hole was promised to be filled by DCG. However, it was promised to be filled through a promissory note that would be paid back over the course of 10 years and was accounted for as if that was $1.2 billion in the bank. That is, say it with me, accounting fraud. That's not the way that works. That is an obvious way to mislead investors in your company to lead them to believe that you actually have more money than you do. So Genesis is going bankrupt, and this is taking a lot of money with it. However, this could actually be a good thing for earned users, and that's what Cameron Winklevoss has to say over here on Twitter. Cameron Winklevoss, remember, is the co-founder of Gemini, along with his brother, Tyler Winklevoss. And these two guys have been getting shafted by rich tech giants for a long time. It's really kind of sad. I mean, it's kind of the story of their life. I wonder if they'll make a movie about DCG blowing up and they'll make Cameron Winklevoss and Tyler Winklevoss out to be the enemy again. Anyway, earn update. This evening, Genesis Global Capital, LLC, Genesis, filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11. This is actually a crucial step towards us being able to recover your assets. Again, he's speaking to Gemini Earn users, the 340,000 that are out $766 million. While we have been working around the clock to negotiate an acceptable solution, Barry Silbert and DCG Co., the parent company of Genesis, continue to refuse to offer creditors a fair deal. The good news is that, by seeking the protection of the bankruptcy court, Genesis will be subject to judicial oversight and be required to provide discovery into the machinations that brought us to this point. Crucially, the decision to put Genesis into bankruptcy does not insulate Barry, DCG, and any other wrongdoers from accountability. We have been preparing to take direct legal action against Barry, DCG, and others who share responsibility for the fraud that has caused harm to the 340,000 plus earned users and others duped by Genesis and its accomplices. Unless Barry and DCG come to their senses and make a fair offer to creditors, we will be filing a lawsuit against Barry and DCG imminently. I don't know what imminently means to you, but I would say that probably means within the next 7 days, especially considering how fast this is all moving. Meanwhile, we will use every tool available to us in the bankruptcy court to maximize recovery for earned users and any other parties within the bankruptcy court's jurisdiction. We also believe that, in addition to owing creditors all of their money back, Genesis, DCG, and Barry owes them an explanation. Bankruptcy court provides a much-needed forum for that to happen. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Love that quote. This marks an important milestone in our efforts to help earned users get their assets back. Doing so remains our highest priority. So if you don't remember, I'm not going to go through all of it, but essentially Cameron Winklevoss pinned 2 open letters to DCG's founder and CEO, Barry Silbert, accusing him of many things, but most inflammatory of which was accounting fraud. He accused DCG of offering a $1.1 billion promissory note to fill the hole in Genesis's books that was left by a very shady trade that it was making with 3 Arrows Capital when 3 Arrows Capital went bankrupt. However, according to Cameron Winklevoss, DCG and Genesis went ahead and logged that $1.1 billion as if it was already there, effectively making money out of thin air. Last I checked, the only people that can do that are federal governments, and so that was what Cameron Winklevoss was accusing of being accounting fraud. Now it seems that that may be the case, that was in fact happening, because the fact is, they don't have enough money to remain solvent. Even the $1.1 billion would not have been enough for them to remain stable. So what does this mean for crypto? Well, first and foremost, this is a pretty big story for anybody who wants to get money back from Gemini Earn. As Cameron Winklevoss said, if you're a Gemini Earn user, this is actually going to make things a lot easier on you, because instead of having to go through Barry Silbert and DCG, who Cameron Winklevoss is accused, and he's probably right, of engaging in bad faith stall tactics, to use his quote, then you're more than likely going to be able to see the judicial oversight of a bankruptcy court forcing them to return as much money as they possibly can to Gemini Earn, so that Gemini Earn can turn around and return it to their customers. If you're a customer of a lending platform that generates APY, why would you do that? It's not a bad idea if it's decentralized and it's totally secured and there's no need for trust there's no counterparty risk involved. But if there is counterparty risk involved, as there was in this case, there was counterparty risk involved. The counterparty risk was Genesis. Maybe steer clear of it and invested in something like the stock market or invested in something like Bitcoin, and just be okay with that. Now, there are different places where you would hope that you'd be able to be more secure, such as on Coinbase. I'm not affiliated with Coinbase in any way necessarily. I do use them, but you would think that their earned products will be a little bit safer than what was going on here. Hopefully, the industry will be much more secure moving into the next bull market, and generating yields through APY like that is something that we will actually be able to engage in and not lose all of our money on. But right now, we've seen the bankruptcy of Celsius. We are now seeing the downfall of the Gemini Earn program, which may come back, but probably won't. That is definitely something that should lead us to be concerned about whether or not it is a good idea to be inside of these programs in the first place. All right. So what does this mean for the price of Bitcoin? Well, I think it's very interesting that Bitcoin's price has not actually declined yet on this news. It's still sitting around $21,152. It's doing quite well. And there is, in fact, a little known man that I might want to show you, and his name is Charles Hoskinson, and I've met him before. He's not a little known man, by the way. He's a very well-known man in the cryptocurrency space. And you probably are going to want to hear what he has to say here. So I will go ahead and play this clip. It is about 2 to 3 minutes long, so just go ahead and bear with me here as he speaks. 1 second. And let me know in chat if you can hear this. I think you will be able to hear this.
Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live.
Sorry, I listen to things on 2 times speed because my brain works quickly. I'm going to turn that down. It's the first 3 minutes here. Listen to this.
Colorado, always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is January 19th, 2023. Interesting year already. So anyway, with the failure of DCG, it looks like they're starting to shell off assets. And something that came by my desk recently is that Coindesk is either raising money or attempting to actually get acquired. So I've been through the grapevine talking to people, looking into things and trying to figure out what the price is. And it looks like the price is probably going to be hovering somewhere around $200 million if somebody was just go and buy the thing outright, or at least that's what they're asserting they're worth. Now, I haven't seen any books or financials, but I've been hearing that gross profit was hovering somewhere around 50 million. So it'd be interesting to see what the EBITDA is and what the ratios are, as well as the projections that they have. Is that a 2021 number and everything was in the cocaine and hookers era and we're making great money? And, what does 2022 look like? And, last 3 years, 5 years. Interestingly enough, DCG acquired the asset in 2016 from 500,000. So, 400x over acquisition is pretty interesting balls for evaluation. Now, why am I interested in an asset like this? Coindesk or Cointelegraph or anything. Actually, for years, I've thought about what would make an elite media institution and what are some of the things required. As you know, we've been a recipient of some extremely bad media, some just because they didn't take the time to really research and deeply get into things, and some because there was actually an agenda to defame. So we find out a little later on that FTX gave the block a large sum of money or agents of that organization to write articles in a certain direction. Cointelegraph is actually owned by an oligarch, and there's some shady stuff there. And everybody wants to basically have a media outlet and use that as a way to express influence in the space. Okay, so our chain is great and this other chain is bad. My interest on the media side is actually more broad in that I would like to figure out how to get to journalistic integrity again. You've probably seen, if you've watched my whiteboard videos and you've seen me talk in AMAs over the years, things like veracity bonds or other concepts where when someone publishes something, the thing that they publish, they actually put money on the table. And if it turns out the thing that they've written isn't true or it's inaccurate, they actually can lose the money that they've bonded for it. Wouldn't that be amazing in journalism where there's a financial incentive for people to actually fact check the people who are the fact checkers?
Wouldn't that be wild? That is such a good idea. One that I could totally get behind. So how about that? Charles Hoskinson is actually interested in buying a media outlet like Coindesk. As I said, guys, Coindesk is the most trafficked, most visited cryptocurrency publication in the entire industry. So if he were to buy Coindesk, he would have so much influence, it's not even funny. And of all people that would be interested in buying a cryptocurrency publication, I think I would probably trust Charles Hoskinson more than most to ensure that it's done correctly. You saw a lot of the people in chat there saying how special that would be if Charles Hoskinson did buy that, because as you heard him talk about, he's very interested in journalistic integrity. That's something that they're very interested in at Cardano with their, their 3 major core values that all interlink together. The whole point of what Charles Hoskinson and Cardano are trying to do is to go ahead and build something that is trustworthy, that is built on a trustless blockchain, but nevertheless can be trusted and verified. So it makes a lot of sense to me that he would be interested in buying something like Coindesk so that he could ensure that media was run the right way. This would be very reminiscent of a Elon Musk takeover of Twitter. It'd be very, very interesting to see what he did here, and he'd definitely get a lot of publication, a lot of fame for that. Like he said, only $200 million. That's very interesting that Coindesk would only run you $200 million. I wish I had $200 million. I would go and buy Coindesk totally if I was able to, because that is a very powerful publication here in the cryptocurrency industry. And like I said, the thing that's going on here is that Charles Hoskinson realizes, hey, DCG is breaking up. And in fact, in the live stream, Charles Hoskinson pretty much came out and said straight up, look, DCG is going belly up, and they're going to have to start selling off assets and liquidating things so that they can save money, so that they can go forth and not completely become insolvent. So it actually makes a lot of sense that they would sell Coindesk and that they would try and raise money in that way. The philosopher said, hashtag AdaGang. I agree, hashtag AdaGang. I am definitely loving some Cardano right now. All right, let's go ahead and read some chat here, and then we will jump straight back into our technical analysis. Let's see. That's why he's going to sell ADA and buy it with cash. Yeah. I hate 3AC. Lost me money via Voyager. Yeah. Yeah, 3AC lost people a lot of money. We've got to be really careful. The philosopher in chat said, yo, what's up, Jebb? Good to see you, the philosopher. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you, my friend. Let's see. Veracity VRA is going crazy. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone who thinks they know what will happen in the market is a sucker. Yeah, you got to be careful because you never really know what's going to happen. Let's see. Bitcoin will go to 9 to 12K. Nothing to prevent that. We'll see. I'm surprised it hasn't already gone through a much larger dump. That's definitely making a big impact. He's not going to ask me to send 3,000 ADA for 6,000 back. No, he's not going to do that. He wants you to be financially sovereign. Charles Hoskinson is the reason Cardano is the biggest holding in my portfolio. I do like myself some Cardano. Charles is very smart. I've been supporting him since the beginning. I want decentralization from centralized banks. Decentralization is broadly a good thing, depending on how you are implementing it. Sometimes it can make things less efficient and actually break. But in general, if you're able to decentralize things, a lot of times, if the application fits, then it is a very good thing. Hey, Jebb, what are your thoughts on February CPI report? Asking because I'm curious if you think mortgage rates will dip down a bit. That's a wonderful question. I'm not really expecting mortgage rates to drop very much, considering the effective federal funds rate is still increasing. The thing you have to keep in mind is that the reason the Fed hikes rates is because they are trying to manipulate consumption in a consumption-based economy. The way the world works is about to shift dramatically because you are having the baby boomers age into retirement in the United States. You have essentially no millennial generation in much of the rest of the world, and you have just hundreds of millions of people all aging into retirement at the exact same time. So what happens when you age into retirement is multifaceted. Number one, you stop making money because you don't have a job anymore because you're retired. Duh. Number two, you stop investing because you are not making any money anymore. So one, you're not contributing to the economy in the form of capital, being part of the capital pool. But two, you're also not contributing to the stock market through being a net investor rather than a net divester of the stock market. So it's a twofold hit. Number one, you stop making money, so you're not in the workforce anymore, so the workforce of your nation goes down by one human being. Number two, you are no longer a net investor of the stock market, you are now a net divester of the stock market, which means you are taking money out of the stock market, meaning that the economy just got weaker twofold. Number one, it lost one manpower, if you will, woman power, whatever. And then it also lost some investment in its stock market, which means the growth will slow down, and you'll need the younger people to work even harder to do that. And the third front is that you typically consume a lot less when you are retired. Your expenses a lot of times go down. All of that is important because that consumption is what is manipulated by the federal funds rate. You have to have a consumption-based economy that has a lot of people buying things for the effective federal funds rate to be effective for the Federal Reserve for them to be able to do what they're trying to do. But as you have many people aging into retirement in the United States, especially around the world, the cost of credit is no longer quite as important because people are not using credit as much as they used to, because most people that are retired are not taking out loans because they don't have an income to pay them down. So you end up running into a situation where the funds rate is not as effective as it used to be because credit is not as much of the driver of the economy. Now it's more of a spending economy where you have people divesting from the stock market and moving into retirement and spending. That is a different financial model than what we have right now. So the reason that all of that ties into your question is because the Federal Reserve is raising rates aggressively so that they have dry powder in reserve, not for this crisis, but for the next crisis. Let's say Taiwan gets invaded by China. Let's say Turkey launches an invasion on northern Syria. That's something that's been talked about. The United States is no longer patrolling the Persian Gulf. You could very well see an Iranian and a Saudi Arabian war at some point. That would drive oil prices through the roof, as both of those nations are very closely tied to the global oil industry. They are raising rates so that they have dry powder in reserve, so that if another major conflict ensues, then they have some way of dropping the cost of credit and stimulating the economy. That's probably not going to lead to a major drop in the interest rates for probably over a year. I think we'll end up plateauing around 5 to 6%, maybe even higher, but we will probably sit up there for some time. So are mortgage rates going to go down? I wouldn't bet on it. I would bet for mortgage rates to stay exactly where they are or go up. The best way in the next 2 years to get a better rate on your mortgage is going to have a better credit score. Matt C. said, I love Charles. Was lucky enough to sit in for one of his interviews last year at Consensus. It was amazing. Yep. Jebb, I hope your system is plugged in. Battery saver sucks. Yeah, you saw that too. I saw that while we were listening to Charles Hoskinson. So I ran and grabbed my charger and plugged in the laptop while you guys were watching Charles Hoskinson. Haha, sneaky. Normally I wouldn't have the opportunity to run off in the middle of a stream, but I was able to plug that in and make sure that won't happen. Quick update on the back end of things. I think Monday I will actually be streaming from my MacBook from now on, and I've got a couple of different technical updates on the way the stream will look. Just some minor things, but that I think that you guys will like. All right, let's go ahead and mortgage rates will start to drop once the rate hikes are paused. Banks will then start to lower the rates to become the most competitive. That's more or less what I would, for the most part, agree with that. The thing is, they can't drop them that much because they still have to rely on that effective federal funds rate as their base rate. Anyway, moving on to the Bitcoin market, I want to show you what's going on with Bitcoin here, and then we're going to talk about some macro geopolitical factors that are in the news and that you're definitely going to want to keep up with. So, Genesis is going bankrupt. You can see this news dropped at 2:21 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. It also dropped on a couple of different publications. This publication over here dropped at 11, about 3 hours ago or so. And by the way, this has slightly another number in here. That's why I left this up. Conservative estimates of Genesis's liabilities around $3 billion. The lender and broker's filing indicated at least $3.8 billion of liabilities. Just so that you have a more up-to-date number of that, it's probably around $3.8 billion in liabilities. Anyway, we saw the news drop right around here from Bloomberg. Bloomberg, a reporter over at Bloomberg, had some inside information and had the scoop of a lifetime and said, hey, look, Genesis is probably going to go bankrupt. That was right here. We believed it because Genesis probably was going to go bankrupt based on what we saw coming out of Cameron Winklevoss's Twitter over the last 2 weeks. And what we've seen happen to Gemini Earn users. So Bitcoin basically had absolutely no response to that. This is the market ever since Genesis was announced that it was going to go bankrupt. Everything beyond this line is the market since we knew that Genesis was going to go bankrupt. We had our hunch before, but now we pretty much know. So the question comes down to this. Is the collapse of Genesis priced in, or has it not affected Bitcoin at all yet? Because it hasn't affected Bitcoin pretty much at all. Bitcoin's doing the exact same thing that it was doing before, gradually pushing to the upside, gradually just sneaking up here on 21,500, wondering if it can get a breakout. What is their bankruptcy going to do to the price of Bitcoin? Well, let's just back up a little bit here and remember the macro that I talked about. Remember what I talked about concerning the fact that, let's just go to full screen here for a second. Just remember the macro fact that, I'm going to run through a bunch of things here and their implication on crypto. Ukraine is getting a ton of armor from the West. Bullish thing, because if Russia runs over Ukraine, you see the biggest drop in the stock market since at least 2008, probably since the dot-com bubble. Why? Because people think World War III is going to happen. They just got a bunch of armored fighting vehicles. We're going to talk about Poland here in a second. Poland's about to go rogue, more than likely. That's actually a bullish thing for the stock market because it leads to more stability in Europe if the balance of power is even or Ukraine's winning. That's a bullish factor. Number two, we've got the EFFR coming in at 25 basis points, bullish. We already talked about that. Dixie's going down, bullish. Inverse correlation, we talked about that. S&P 500 is gradually rallying, bullish. We've talked about that. Bitcoin is shaking off quite a lot of the breach of confidence that the market had post FTX's collapse. That's bullish. That's wonderful. We actually saw some news that a lot of people thought was going to be terrible coming out of the DOJ on Tuesday, was it? Where they said that they were going to, that they had arrested the founder and CEO and majority shareholder of a tiny little company called Bitslato. Legadimov is the guy's name that they arrested. Anatoly Legadimov. They arrested him in Miami. He's currently being held in Rikers Island, I think, in New York City. Don't quote me on that, but he's being held somewhere awaiting trial. That helped a lot of people in the industry and in the broader world that are interested in investing in crypto have more confidence that the DOJ is actually going to prosecute exchanges that are not operating by the law. So that's a bullish thing as well. So there's an overall bullish air in crypto right now. And then one final thing I'll say is that pretty much every cryptocurrency looks like it's bottomed out. Cardano, for example, has dropped substantially. If we look at the, let's say, 3-day chart here, on ADA, you're going to see it looks like it has bottomed out. We've seen the market drop 92%, broke bullish out of its descending wedge right here. Same thing over on Ethereum. Ethereum has broken this downtrending level of resistance. Looks like any day now it could break bullish above this downtrending level of resistance. So there's a lot of hope in Bitcoin right now. There is a lot of enthusiasm in crypto right now. There's a lot of, gee, I really just want to see Bitcoin break 21.5. A lot of people are sitting on their hands saying, it's about to do it, it's about to do it, it's about to do it. And also on top of that, we've got Lux Algo sitting here, not on the 1-hour chart, that is still bearish, but on the 4-hour chart, it is bullish, very bullish. As you can see, there's a sell signal, but it's not confirmed. We've got a confirmed buy signal on the 4-hourly chart. First major confirmed buy signal on the 4-hourly chart since here. The last time that happened was here. So this is a pretty big signal. 4-hourly chart, we're massively above the EQ cloud. We're massively above the reversal zone. Trend catcher is massively above the EQ cloud. That's all wonderful. You look out at the daily chart, even more bullish. This is the first major buy signal that we've had on Lux Algo confirmed in a year. The last one was confirmed here on February 28th of last year. That was in the beginning of the bear market, so it makes sense that that didn't go too far. The last confirmed buy signals before that were these two. Both of these confirmed buy signals saw Bitcoin rally 75%. On top of that, the trend that we've talked about before, that is the EQ cloud turning bullish and the trend catcher being bullish above it, and Bitcoin breaching into the top half, not even just into the reversal zone, but into the top half of the reversal zone, indicates that there is a lot of bullish exuberance since Bitcoin has not just fallen straight out of this. Just the fact that Bitcoin can trade sideways up here indicates that the bulls are exceptionally strong right now. So with all of that in mind, we have to ask the question, is Genesis going bankrupt, which many of us expected anyway, actually strong enough to cause a major capitulation on Bitcoin? Pretty much none of the bullish factors that I just said were here 3 months ago. We saw Bitcoin break bullish and go through a short rally towards the end of October. That was due to a major short squeeze on, you guessed it, FTX, and that was probably a manipulated move in the first place. So we didn't really have a lot going on back then. The Dixie was coming down, but it was just starting to come down. It wasn't a confirmed trend yet. The S&P 500 was looking terrible. The interest rates were still rallying a lot faster, and this is before Ukraine had gotten a bunch of armor, which allows for the global stock market to look at, dropped my hat, to look at the Ukrainian conflict and say, look, these guys might actually win this thing, which a lot of people thought that anyway, but they might actually win this thing because they just got a bunch of Bradley fighting vehicles. They just got a bunch of AMX 10 RCs from France. They're getting, more recently, just over the last several days, earlier this week, they were confirmed to get a ton of artillery and artillery pieces. We're talking 100,000 shells and a bunch of artillery pieces and a squadron of Challenger 2 tanks. And this will lead me into one of the geopolitical points I'm going to talk about later. Poland is likely to go rogue and say, screw you, Germany. We're going to re-export them anyway, even without your permission. We'll talk about that in a moment and go into more detail on that. The point is, 3 months ago when FTX collapsed, we had the perfect situation for a major market collapse. Today, we have the perfect situation for a major market rally. We've already seen the first leg of what that would look like. Is Genesis enough water to put the fire out? Doesn't seem like that's the case right now. But that's just the first scenario. The second scenario is that Genesis going bankrupt hasn't actually affected the market in a major way yet because it hasn't gone through the bankruptcy process. But I really don't think that's the most likely scenario, because the thing is, Genesis going bankrupt doesn't actually change a whole lot. And I think this is the major reason why this is not having the same impact that FTX had. FTX directly impacted several million customers because one day they could log on to FTX and withdraw funds, and the next day they couldn't. The people that have been trying to get money out of Genesis have not been able to get money out of Genesis for months. This is nothing new. Them filing for bankruptcy was written on the wall. Nobody saw FTX coming, and also post-FTX, People are expecting bankruptcies. We've already seen BlockFi go bankrupt, for example. We were expecting Genesis to go bankrupt. Now the major black swan that could come out of this, because if it's just Genesis going bankrupt and they just have to move some money around, Coindesk gets sold to Charles Hoskinson, that doesn't have a big impact on the market. If anything, that might be bullish because you get rid of some of the bad actors. You move Coindesk to a good actor, that being Charles Hoskinson, which would help with the media environment. And then you also look at something like more stability in that Genesis can't go bankrupt anymore. A company that's already bankrupt can't go bankrupt again. I mean, I can in the future, but while it's in the process of bankruptcy, you're not going to have an announcement that they're going bankrupt, which would be a black swan event. It's already taken place. That card's been taken off the table. It's out of the hand. So the next big black swan, and this is really the last thing that I could see that would collapse the price of Bitcoin, at least on the horizon right now, would be if Grayscale went bankrupt and they had to offload 600,000 Bitcoin back to their users and they had a major hole in their books. That seems to be unlikely to me, but I don't know what Grayscale's internal finances look like. For all I know, they could have sold off 300,000 Bitcoin and they have a $10 billion hole in their books. I have no idea. But at the moment, from what I'm seeing, it seems like Genesis going down may result in DCG liquidating Coindesk, may result in Genesis having difficulty getting money back to people, and it may result in Grayscale having to come in and DCG having to come in to help fill the hole in Genesis to make them whole, which would spread contagion to the rest of the DCG empire, but at least for now, that probably wouldn't cause them to go bankrupt overnight. That contagion would probably take many months to fester and spread, which means, in a way, despite this being really bearish news, we might be kind of out of the woods for right now. And I think that might be what a lot of people are thinking. They're thinking, well, Bitcoin is just in a great position right now. It's in a phenomenal, remarkably strong position, and the biggest threat to that was DCG going bankrupt, and the market shrugged it off. That indicates quite a lot of strength from the bulls. That indicates that the bulls are thinking, go bankrupt if you want. We're going home. We're going back up to the moon. That's where we belong. And the market's going to rally. So we shall see. But in my estimation, it seems to be that the market is looking more so at the multiplicity of macro factors and technical factors that are pointing Bitcoin to the upside, and the massive run we just partook in a week ago, and saying, yeah, Genesis going bankrupt, that's not exactly a good thing, although in some ways it is, because again, that's going to help get money back to Gemini Earn users. They're probably very happy about this, but it's not strong enough for us to sell our Bitcoin and for us to drop the market. We're going to keep buying, and the market's going to rally. Now the question is, can Bitcoin break $21,500? That is the defining question of this market right now, because if Bitcoin can confidently break 21.5 and rally up to 22 or 23, that's where you say, okay, we just established $20,000 as a floor again, and we don't expect that it'll break anytime soon unless you see DCG, Coinbase, Binance, or Crypto.com go bankrupt, in which case you may see a major drop. But I think at this point, one of the last things that could cause a huge drop on Bitcoin and cause us to go back to fresh lows would be the collapse of a major customer-facing company, Genesis not being a customer-facing company, but Coinbase, Binance, Crypto.com, and yeah, probably those three. One of them going bankrupt would be a black swan that could drop us significantly, or DCG and Grayscale themselves. Other than that, I think I think as far as contagion is concerned, it might be starting to get contained. It looks like the Three Arrows Capital contagion is probably weeding itself out through Genesis. Looks like FTX is starting to weed itself out through Genesis. The one thing to keep in mind is that Genesis going bankrupt could bring down the rest of the DCG empire. We have to keep a very close eye on that. But that notwithstanding, I think we might actually be in good position to rally well above $21,000 here in just the next couple of weeks. We shall stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and read chat here, see how you guys are doing. Pick my hat back up, put that back where it goes. Oh, I got dirty. I gotta clean that now. Anyway, a hat that nice needs to be shaped by a pro. Yeah, I don't really know too much about hat shaping, so tell me what I do with that. I heard somebody tell me to go to Boot Barn. This is the hat that they're talking about, by the way. My wife got me that for Christmas. Great Christmas gift. In our heads, it already happened with Genesis. Yes, that's pretty much what I'm saying. All right. Grand Roofing Incorporated in chat said, hey, hi, everyone. Sorry I'm tardy. Was busy with a customer doing an inspection on a roof. I'll just be in and out listening in the background working on estimates. There you go. Good to see you, Grand Roofing. Glad you could tune in. Exodus Wallet, ADA, APY, 4.91%. Yeah, there you go. I, too, have to watch at 1.75 to 2x speed to catch up. Listening at 1.5, catching up. Love Jebb sped up. That's funny. Yeah, I do sound pretty funny when you're talking that quickly. There was a channel All in crypto, there was ADA. This Genesis bankruptcy is not exactly a surprise. Most likely prices are baked in. That's pretty much what I'm getting at. I think it's already baked in. A question, do you think that the market would have already factored in, considered the Genesis bankruptcy, which won't make Bitcoin drop that much significantly again? That's what I'm thinking, yeah. Make sure you're staying hydrated, guys. All right. Let's see. Could you do a video on investing $1,000 and in your opinion where you should put it? I can consider that for sure. Let's see. Jebb went around the blockchain. Jebb around the blockchain when? Well, I reached out to them and I haven't heard back yet. So I would love to go on around the blockchain. You guys can go over there and bug them in chat and say, Crypto Jebb wants to come back on. Let me know. Hope your system is plugged in. Battery savers suck. Still having trouble with CT2A. I think what it is, guys, is that there's an update coming, and I'm not going to tell you too much about it right now, but the link got broken. So I'm going to need to try and put the link in the description box so I can link you guys there. I will work on that today and look in the description box here in about here probably by mid next week, but I'll probably have it done today. And we'll see if that can fix it, because I'm not exactly sure what the problem is. I've been working on a lot of things. I do apologize for that. Hey, Jebb, I appreciate all you do. Still having trouble getting access to CT2A videos. Sign into my account and can't watch videos, question mark. When will we plan a membership stream again, like the old days? That's a good question. We do need to get that back. We're working on a lot of stuff right now, so I'm not sure if that's going to be in this round of updates, but I would like to do that. Bears are trapped. Massive market squeeze setup. Boil lemonade in water, peach tea, mint, or green tea, and lots of honey work every time. Joined late, but heard the itchy throat part. Yeah, sorry about that. Jebb, do you do classes or teach people crypto privately? Well, not at the moment. Not at the moment, but that very well may change in the near future. We shall see. Love the hat, Sarah. Queen said. Your opinion on ETH Classic? Well, the classics are fun, but they don't normally make the best investments, at least in crypto, because you're investing in tech. You're not investing in nostalgia. Jebb is most definitely a good guy. I'm a family man myself. He is way more relatable than most. I don't know about that. I just like being real with you guys. Anyway, so we got one more story that we're going to throw in here, and I don't have an article for it, but I was reading about it this morning, and it's quite important. So, as you guys know, there is a major conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. You probably heard about this war, but you might not know just how significant it is. I talk about it almost every single day on this channel because it is the single most important event that has happened in human history in the last 30 years when it comes to geopolitics. Hands down, bar none. It may even be more important than the fall of the Soviet Union. Essentially, what you're looking at right now is a civil war between former Soviet states. Russia was the premier state of the 15-nation bloc that was the Soviet Union. You also have Belarus, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and a few other nations in there. Russia used to have borders that it was able to defend. It was able to defend its borders, in theory anyway, when it, along with Nazi Germany in 1942, invaded and blitzkrieged Poland, and then the Russians moved up to the middle part of Poland. The reason they did that was because if you are holding territory in the plains of Poland, then you were able to establish a defensive line that's about 500 kilometers long between the mountains and between the sea. And then if you go down through all of the mountains in Central Europe, then you're able to have a defensive line down between the mountains, down around the what river am I trying to think of? The Danube, around the Danube, between the mountains and the Black Sea, and you have about a 250-mile long, 250-kilometer wide defensive gap there as well. And then the mountains cover about 2/3 of your flank moving into Western Europe. The Russians used to have those borders in the Soviet Union, even moving into the beginning of the Second World War when they allied themselves with the Nazis, and then the Nazis turned and backstabbed them. But then towards the end of the war, when they broke Germany up into two different states, they had those borders as well. When the Iron Curtain fell, when the Warsaw Pact evaporated, and when the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost those borders. And right now, Russia has a 2,500-mile-long border going right through a bunch of plains and pine forests, and they cannot defend that. They don't even have road networks through all of that because the productivity of the Russian land is so low that you don't even have the entire Russian ecosystem connected through road network. You have to ride around on a train to get in between Russian cities. even in the West. So they've got a massive indefensible border, and they've got a growing NATO that is 100 times more militarily powerful than they are now. If they did fully conquer Ukraine and also Moldova, there are very good reasons to believe that if Ukraine had fallen, Moldova would have been declared war on the next day, because it's right next door to Ukraine. Even the Belarusian president kind of let that slip. He's a communist and a dictator. And he's also a very good friend of Putin. He's one of the guys that helped Putin get into power about 20 years ago or so. Both of those nations would have likely invaded Moldova and would have tried to establish what used to be the Warsaw Pact, except in this case, instead of having 15 states, you would have had 4. You would have had Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, those 4. They also still have quite a lot of influence in Uzbekistan and also in Kazakhstan, so they have pretty much rebuilt the former Soviet Union in a small way if they were able to conquer Ukraine. Well, Ukraine put up a lot more resistance than they thought. Ukrainians at that point now had a national identity that they were willing to fight and die for. That was not the case in 2014 so much, when their nation was racked by corruption and they had a pseudo-dictator in charge of the nation of Ukraine. That changed over the last 8 years, and Russia didn't expect it. The Ukrainians put up a ridiculously strong fight and fought for every single inch of soil when the Russians tried to invade through Belarus and capture Kyiv. They failed miserably. It was atrocious, the military performance of Russia, and by all counts, in the same way the British should have, not morally, but militarily should have won the Revolutionary War against the United States, Russia should have. I'm not saying morally. I'm very glad they didn't, but technologically, militarily, manpower-wise, politically, geographically, they should have been able to take Kyiv. They didn't. They failed. They operated abysmally. The Russian troops believed that they'd be able to march straight into Kyiv and nobody would put up a fight. They got what was akin to the way the Americans were fighting for their independence. The Ukrainians wanted to maintain their statehood because they saw what happened in Donbass and they knew what the Russians would do if they lost. So they fought for every inch and they kicked them out of their capital region within 2 months. That was a remarkable fight. Ukraine needs to survive, and they need to maintain sovereignty of their borders for a few reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do. They're a sovereign nation. We don't invade each other anymore. That's part of the modern world. That's part of the way that things work nowadays ever since World War II. That's the understanding, is you don't go through military conquest and expand your borders like we did for all of human history. That's supposed to be in the past. It's not, because we're still humans. But that's supposed to be in the past. It's the right thing to do. You don't invade people and in their life for the sake of taking their stuff. It's evil. It's a wretched thing. But number two, if you live anywhere in the world other than Ukraine, you still want them to win this war, because if Russia gets those borders back, they still don't have all their borders. They would still need to capture half of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and also move into Romania to reestablish their former Soviet borders. Every single one of those nations is a NATO member. If Russia made an attempt on those nations, that would trigger an Article 5 response, and you'd have World War III. You'd have the largest shooting war on the ground in Eastern Europe that you have seen in 75 years since the Second World War. That would be oblivion for the world, because if Ukraine does fall and Russia does run over Ukraine and they do knock on Poland's door, which they most certainly will, then they will probably declare a shooting war. They will lose because the West is so much more powerful than Russia, and then Russia will get pushed back to Moscow more than likely within 2 years, and then they'll have to fall back on nuclear weapons. You don't want that. That's a very bad thing for business. It's obviously a very bad thing morally, but it's a horrible thing for business. It's a horrible thing for the way that the world works. So, Poland, realizing this, is sitting on a fleet of about 240 Leopard 2 main battle tanks. If Ukraine had all of those, or even just a quarter of those, they would be able to, in the spring, here in a couple of months, be able to push back the Russians, push straight through their lines, and probably recapture a town called Mariupol, which is in the south of Ukraine. That would cause a bottleneck. That would cut off supply lines between the Donbass region and the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, would stop the Russians from being able to resupply Crimea and the area just south of Kherson, and the Ukrainians will more than likely be able to take the Crimean Peninsula and also the region just south of the the Dnipro River very, very quickly, and they would effectively have won the war. But they need main battle tanks to close the distance between Zaporizhzhia, the nuclear power station, and the Sea of Azov, which is just northeast of Crimea. For them to do that, they need main battle tanks. They can't do it just with infantry fighting vehicles and HIMARS. They need main battle tanks. That's why the Brits have pledged 14 Challenger 2 main battle tanks, and that's why Poland wants to send them Leopard 2s. The problem is the Germans have the re-export license on the Leopard 2 because the Germans are the one that created the Leopard 2 main battle tanks. However, the leader of Poland, blanking on his name, the leader of Poland is pretty much saying, I'm going to paraphrase a direct quote I read this morning. He said, consent is a secondary issue in the issue of sending Leopard 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine. By law, Poland would need to get the consent of Germany to re-export their main battle tanks. However, Poland, realizing that if Ukraine falls, they are going to be thrust into a land-based war between them and Russia, after Russia has captured all of that Western armor, if Russia were to win. So Poland is basically saying, hey, we need to support them or our entire nation and our national integrity and sovereignty comes under threat within the next 12 months. So you very well may see Poland sending at least 12, if not even more, Leopard 2 main battle tanks, even without Germany's approval, within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Germany might get pushed back into a corner and end up having to do it anyway, because it might not just be Poland. Finland also knows that if they are pulled into a war, that they're going to have to go into a shooting war with Russia again. They had 3 of them in the last century. They don't want another one of those. They built their entire society around fending off of Russia. So they may end up sending their Leopard 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine as well. And you could end up getting 50 or 100 of those things in Ukraine, even without Germany's permission, which would probably lead to them kowtowing and allowing it. So all of that to say, Poland very well may end up saying, forget you, Olaf Scholz. We're going to send the main battle tanks anyway. And frankly, that wouldn't be legal, but at the end of the day, that may end up being the best thing, because Poland does not want Ukraine to fall, because Poland is next, and they know it. So that's just a little bit of an update on the geopolitical situation. Again, that has a huge impact on crypto, because the more stable the Ukrainian-Russian war looks, or the more it looks like Ukraine's going to win, the better that is for, obviously, humanitarian reasons. That's our main concern, but since we're talking about crypto and markets, it almost seems weird to talk about its impact on markets, considering people are losing their life. But the impact on markets is that the more stable Ukraine's situation is, and the more likely it looks like they're going to win, the more stable the markets are. Because if Ukraine falls, the impact on the humanitarian side of things is atrocious. The impact on the market is absolutely terrible as well. One of those things is obviously far more important than the other, that being the humanitarian side of things. Will Ukraine get Crimea back? In my estimation, they need the spring offensive that they are almost certainly going to embark on to go very well. If they are able to close the gap between Zaporizhia and the Sea of Azov, or even just get within 50 miles, so if they're able to blow up any convoys sending supplies there, since they blew up the Kerch Strait Bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia last year, in the rail connection there, then more than likely they will get Crimea back. But they're really going to need some main battle tanks to be able to do it, and they need modern ones as well. All right. Morning, Jebb. Talk about crypto, not geopolitical. I'm sorry. The thing is that it's very interesting to me, and also it's something that is very important to crypto. It's also very important to you, so I will continue to talk about it, but I do appreciate the input there. Charles and Elon should get together and create an open source news outlet. That'd be interesting. Maybe it could be Coindesk. Russia is waiting for those tanks so they can copy all the parts for building. The thing is, Russia doesn't have the military-industrial complex to recreate those main battle tanks because they don't have the equipment. They've been sanctioned so hard that they're having to steal electronics out of Western microwaves so that they can, so that they can build anything. Their industrial complex is in shambles. Now, the amount of food and oil and and things of that effect that are raw resources that take very little refinement, they have plenty of that because they make it on their own. But Western components that are needed for something like a Leopard 2, they don't have the ability to, unless they just outright capture the tank, they don't have the ability to recreate that tank. And they wouldn't have the ability to steal the technology and recreate that tank anyway, because they wouldn't even have the ability to repair a tank like that if they were to shoot it and blow it up. They'd have to get it through the Ukrainians letting it go. But that's really the Russians' MO, is to leave equipment behind, not the Ukrainians. 500 people here. Likes need to go up. Be bullish on the likes, please. Yes, thank you, Robert Casanova. Let's see if we can get to 300 likes before we wrap it out. We are going to have to wrap it out. Really do appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Very interesting world out there. I was told by a political science teacher one time, the more you see the word interesting show up in the news, the more crazy the world is. And it is a very interesting time in the world right now. Prayers for Ukraine, prayers for the people of Russia, prayers for everybody, guys. Look, the thing is, nobody benefits when there's sin going on. The wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. And the thing is, what's going on in Ukraine right now? On all sides, there's a lot of sin going on. There's a lot of death and destruction and evilness going on. I definitely believe that Ukraine should fight for their soil. They should. They have every right to. But it's just sad how much destruction there is going on over there. And we were under this false assumption, this false belief that war was behind us, and that's not true. It's not. It's part of the human condition, unfortunately. And until Christ comes back, that's going to be a continuing problem. How do they win against a guy like Putin? Yeah, well, the thing is, Putin might not have a choice if they take Crimea, which they very well may. All right, guys. Well, I'm running over time. That is going to wrap it out for today's video. I really do appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Look forward to some updates over the next couple of months, and even this coming week. I do think that I'm going to have my new computer online, which will allow me to do a couple of new things that I'm very excited about. I bought a Stream Deck, so going to try and get some new graphics, working on a few different things. Not going to go into too many details, but I've got some exciting developments coming out relatively soon here for the channel. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and follow us on all of our social media for daily updates about the cryptocurrency market. Before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.